So Ash has probably already introduced himself a little bit. He's the Chief Programming Officer with the nonprofit Technology Enterprise Network based in Portland, Oregon. So he got up much sooner than we all did. But Ash, why don't you go ahead and take us into explaining how technology can be our friend after I'm so angry with technology this morning.
I know.
Go right ahead.
Now that everyone's jaded, I'm feeling great about jumping into this. So first thing, I guess, just that reminder, right? We'll still try, and I know we got multiple windows going all over the place now, but I think we'll still try and use the chat, Q&A, all that over in the conference site, because the nice thing is that then that also gets caught and captured for that like 6-month window. And also for anyone who's just trying to come catch the recording later, we want them to see all your great contributions and comments in the chat. So make sure it's there. So pretty much ignore the chat and everything else in this specific Zoom window, and we'll try and keep it open over there. All right, well, with that, I am going to jump into sharing some slides, and we are going to get going because I know we are already working on a compressed schedule here a little bit. So obviously, nonprofit tech readiness. This is what we're going to be talking about. I know there were some questions in the Q&A, just up front. This is not tool specific. Just general strategy, whatever. Anything that N10 does is tool agnostic. So we obviously are happy to recommend tools. But we don't focus on just one, because as different as each of you are, so are the tools that you're using. So we don't want to give you info that's just for a specific. There we go. All right. So just quick ideas, right? Outcomes for today: share knowledge resources, share data-backed tips from our experience, practical next steps. And one I would just add in there, ad hoc, find a way to squeeze 16 minutes out of this deck so that we can still get through all the content and end on time, because you're still going to need your breaks. You still got to get to the rest of this great event. So here's a tiny bit about me. I know they shared my name's Ash Shepard. My pronouns are he, him, Chief Program Officer. But just a little bit about kind of why I'm here. It's, always understand the source of your information, right? So formally educated in land management, specifically wilderness, which is the legal exclusion of technology. So that's a funny little ironic path for me. But I also spent a full decade doing social work, residential programs, school programs, community-based youth development, all that sort of stuff. And then I've now been doing specifically nonprofit technology for about 13 years, 13 and a half. And during that time was a consultant. I worked at nonprofits, but in a consultant role, and then I've done a lot of program design development. So just a bit of that, like, who is this person? So when they tell me information, I know what filter and lens it's coming through. A little bit about N10. You can see we do a whole bunch of stuff, and we focus on professional development, capacity building with other nonprofit folks. And we're a nonprofit ourselves. So I'm not going to read everything that's on there. If nothing else, just understand that N10 has a whole bunch of resources to offer you. So you can go to the website, you can cruise around, check it out. You can also just reach out to me directly. I'm going to do this. I'm just going to drop my email so it's super clear right here in the chat. Oop, better not mistype it. That won't be helpful. Again, if you want to learn more, reach out outside this event, and we'll jump into all that. And I'm happy to answer quick questions by email or jump on a phone call or video chat or anything like that. All right, keeping us clipping towards content. Right, so the other thing is I want to try and make sure this feels like an active session for you. And there are definitely opportunities for you to engage and participate. Just a quick show in the chat, right? Show of hands, some videos are off. Just drop a quick yes in the chat if in your role at your organization, you've had to interact with technology in any way. Anybody? Right? We see it start coming in. So clearly, everybody here has at least some experience that they're bringing to the session today. So there'll be a couple of ways that we do this. Want people to be able to engage in the chat. You'll see this is a Zoom meeting, so you can turn your video on. You can unmute yourself at any point. So I want to put out the commercial. This is not a hold your questions to the end kind of thing, because I actually think that's just a tactic to avoid questions. I want you to ask questions when they pop into your brain and they feel most relevant and connected to our content. So you can drop them in the chat as we go. you can just unmute and ask your question. And then I have a couple of small activities, which hopefully we can still get to, but that may have to be the place we got to squeeze some time. Again, I'm a big fan of respecting your time and ending on time, no matter when we had to start. So just to get us warming up. So here, this is we're going to see this a few times throughout, right? So here's a question, but I don't want you to post your answer yet. I want to give you a moment to type it out. So what we're doing here is making sure that it's not only the fast typers that can get into the chat and then everyone else is left behind. So look at the question, start typing your answer in the chat, but don't actually send it until I give you a prompt here in a second, right? So go ahead, start typing your response in the chat, again, over in the conference app. All right, thinking about it. Hopefully everyone's got this. Ready, set, post. All right, spaghetti meatballs, pizza, pancakes. This sounds like our last week at my house. This sounds good. All right, so we can sort of see, right? So this is kind of how this will work. We'll have a number of these where people can engage in the chat, post their questions there. The next example of how we're hoping to do this is you'll see a slide like this, and this is a prompt where I'm really trying to get us to have some discussion. We want to hear other voices besides just mine as we go through this. So here's another kind of easy one, right? This doesn't require any technical knowledge. So could I get even just one volunteer to unmute? And you don't have to turn your video on. You can have that on, have it off, whatever. But just a chance for people to experience, like, unmute and put your voice into the space as well.
I would love to visit Poland.
Ooh, nice. Poland. Why Poland?
Because of its history of outside forces always trying to change who the Polish people are and how the Polish people maintained their cultural integrity through this very long history. I would just, the story of Krakow, the trumpeter of Krakow, just fascinates me.
Awesome. Anyone else have an example? Country you've never been to, but you'd like to?
I would like to go to Morocco.
Ooh, why Morocco? What's like the top thing that draws you there?
My grandparents lived there in the 50s, so I'd love to go see where
Nice. Nice. Well, excellent. Well, looks like it's working. People know how to unmute, so we're going to be able to jump into some of that. So this is just a little bit of context setting here. So NTM, we have this assessment tool. It's called TechAccelerate, and it does a whole bunch of things for you. And I just want to say, so this is a tool we're coming from, but I already know what you're thinking, right? I knew it. They've got this thing and they're going to sell me, and it's just a service to jump into. But the real reason I want to bring up the TechAccelerate as a tool that NTN has is because this is where the information I'm sharing today is actually coming from. In that it's a tool that was developed after a decade of research that NTN has done. So for 10 years, we did research and put out studies and reports around technology staffing and investment at organizations. And eventually, we always had this idea, when we were able to get funding to back it up, to turn it into more of a dynamic tool instead of just a report for people to access. So in addition to the 10 years of reports, we've now had hundreds of organizations complete profiles and assessments. It allows for benchmarking, so you kind of know similar organizations to yours, where are you at in certain categories, recommends resources, and oftentimes the real use is that people can use it internally with their boards and while looking for grants to advocate for why they need support, buy-in, and funding around technology in particular. So the main thing, again, it's broken into 4 major categories: engagement, infrastructure, leadership, and organizations. So again, sharing, yes, this is a resource NTN has. This is not the sneaky sales pitch sneaking in, just again to validate that the information I'm sharing is coming from this place of research and information and data-driven stuff that we've seen from organizations like yours. So the other thing to acknowledge, and this will end up being a shared resource, you're thinking, I don't have time to complete that assessment right now, but I still need the information. So we have basically a summary of the data that's come out of this tool as well that we put into a report. And so after this session, when I upload slides, I'm just also going to upload the latest copy of this report. And so this is going to give you a chance to get at, a glimpse of what information is in there, kind of at an aggregate level across nonprofits and the sector in general. Again, just knowing the report is great, but the tool itself allows you to sort of see where your organization is, and then also track your change over time. So you can see your own growth and progress. So just letting you know, again, sort of context where what I'm talking about today is coming from. So another thing that's really important, I think, talking about technology in general, and we use this within the tool and things like that, is we use what's called a maturity scale. And so maturity scale is, again, trying to imply that there is a range that people exist on in terms of their people, process, and tools. And so one is just trying to normalize that it's not just based on budget or org size. It's really more about how you go about doing your work. And so understanding that that's sort of a thing that you can grow through, and there are different stages or different aspects of your work might be at different ones. But a maturity scale is nice because it fits more in the way we think as humans, right? It's kind of a narrative format as opposed to straight numbers, right? Like, I don't think I've ever sat down and thought, I would really like to get to a 7.8 today, as opposed to the 4.7 that I'm currently at. It's just not the way it's built. So it really sort of is already built to flow into natural language and how we work and we talk to each other at our organizations. And so there's obviously more detailed breakdown about what the categories mean. But again, try not to overload you on these slides or overload you in just this limited time session. But at a basic level, these are kind of the levels that we use in the scale, and we use it across numerous tools because we just found it to be a helpful way for people to think about things. So it's everything from we are struggling, next is we keep the lights on, and then we keep up, and then we're innovators. So kind of 4 levels there. So in general, that's a scale that we kind of use with the tool and try and help people understand through various programs, just to sort of rate where they're at and help identify where they can kind of grow into next. So with that, we might have to squeeze activities, but it's still important to move. You're going to be sitting on the screen all day. So we have a quick stretch break here, right? So I want you to look at the screen. There's options for standing, sitting, whatever you need to do. So take a look at this. I want you to pick which one looks most appealing to you and just drop the number in the chat real quick. I'm always a fan of number 2, the like a prayer, right? Got your option? Got it going in mind? All right, we're gonna take 15 minutes just to stretch. What I encourage is while you're stretching, feel free to look away the screen for a moment. It seems weird, but there's lots of research that suggests if you just give your eyes even a 20-second break from your computer screen and blue light once an hour, it has significant benefits. So feel free to break eye contact with the screen for the next 15, 20 seconds here. Ready? All right, we're gonna let it roll. I think I'm the only one on video currently stretching. I'm fine with that. I'm fine. All right. Thanks, everybody. All right, so I think we're gonna try this one out. We'll see how it goes. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drop in the chat a link, and this is gonna hop us over to this other sort of interactive collaborative board. And so what I'm gonna do here real quick, you can just follow the link. Important things to note, there's no login. You're there as an anonymous guest. You don't have to sign up for anything. I'm gonna switch over the screen that I'm sharing so folks can also just follow along if they would like to. All right, Lisa, anyone else? I can't see the chat now while I'm sharing this. So if anyone just, Lisa, shake your head if it's actually coming through.
Yes, I can see it.
Excellent. All right, so this one's pretty simple. You can do a lot of wild things with collaborative boards, but I'm trying to keep this one simple in that I want you to think about the question, how would you rate your organization's overall use of technology? And then all you have to do is grab one of these existing Post-it notes and drop it into what feels like the appropriate ring. So you'll click on a note first, and then you should be able to just drag and drop it. Whoa, I see that. That shouldn't be moving. Let me lock that down real quick. There we go. Big circles are no longer going to be moving. All right. So again, part of this is to get you thinking about this. And what I like about this sort of bullseye approach is it allows you to even be in the in-between some of these various stages, right? Maybe it's not super clear cut. We got some folks, right? They're keeping up. This is good. Some folks right on that line between struggling and keeping the lights on. I appreciate the honesty. I also appreciate this is an anonymous tool. So there's no shame, right? You can just sort of state where you are and know that you're not throwing your organization under the bus or anything like that. Nice. I see people jumping into drawing tools. I myself like to explore. Yeah, so what's also helpful, again, anyone who wasn't in the live session and you're just looking at the recording and the event, you can still follow the link. You can still come over here and do all these activities as well on your own asynchronous outside of the event. So it's good to see we got quite a few folks who feel like overall they're keeping up, which is great. All right, so that was just another quick warm up into this tool. And if we have time, we will be coming back into it to do some other stuff near the end. All right, we should be back over at slides now. Anyone want to confirm? Is it coming through?
Yes. Yes, you are.
And also take a moment, right? Not bad, I gotta be honest. Jumping to an external tool and back doesn't always go smoothly. And hopefully it did for most of you. Double checking the chat to see if anyone is, nope, didn't look like things went terribly wrong for anybody. So that's good to see. So what I'm gonna do here, I have just a couple of slides where I just wanna share some examples of the kind of data that comes out of the tool, but also what it is are examples of the kind of ways and questions organizations should be asking to really assess how we're doing in our use of technology. Where are the areas we can improve? And a bit of that, like, is this a place other people are awesome at and we're struggling? Or is this a place that like most people are struggling? It's always nice to just get that sense of connection and to know where other folks are at. So again, just a couple of slides. This is not a total report out of data. So here, to what degree does your website support mobile users? So this is on a scale of 1 to 4, sort of matching the maturity scale, right? There's really 4 stages there. So for the most part, it feels like people are pretty good on this one. 5-6 years ago, this data would certainly look different, but it's good to see where this is coming along now. Next example, this is really sort of, the idea of if you need to pull a targeted list to be able to send out a communication to your constituents, your community, however you think about them, right? How confident are you that you can do that in an accurate manner? So this is helpful. This one's getting a little more in the middle. People feel like they got an all right degree, but they're not super efficient at it. This one's a little more classic bell curve, right? And this is really, do you have an actual process to make sure your website's updated regularly? I think it's kind of good to see. There's not as many people who are like, yep, for sure. And this seems like an area that most of us should be aware of and doing, but again, some struggle happening there. So this one, like, do you actually track and log when you've made configuration changes to your software systems, like in your database, your bulk email? Or is it more a thing that like, oh, I bumped up against something, I just made a change and now we moved on, but now no one else has any idea that change happened or that feature is available or things like that. So we start seeing here like, all right, let's get a little more front loaded. This is not a process as many organizations are focusing on. And this one, I think, tells a pretty vivid story, right? Do you have and test your business continuity plan? Now, what'll be interesting is next year when we look at these results, because a lot of organizations probably had to do this when COVID hit for real. So it'll be interesting to see this one, pulling off of 2019 data versus pulling off 2020. So again, I'm not here to just blast you with a bunch of data. We're going to get into some stuff here soon. So, right, I know at this point, this is what your brain's thinking. You're like, oh, okay, so there's an assessment tool and it has 70 plus questions. And there's a report that has 46 pages of information. You've just made me feel more overwhelmed as opposed to feeling more confident and capable in my job. So what I'm going to be covering for the content for the rest of this is really that. Is trying to say out of a decade of research and now 2.5 years of using the TechAccelerate tool, we can say, based on user feedback and experience, that there are 5 areas where if you're able to make improvement, it has a significant impact in your overall growth within the maturity scale, right? So I want to make you aware, lots of resources, lots of things to think about, which most of you probably already knew, right? That was that feeling on your shoulders anyways, that there were lots of things you could be doing. So I want to take you through these 5, right? Trying to keep things. So if you can only do a couple things, only remember a couple of things, the way this is organized should make that a little easier. Plus opportunities for folks to, participate in the discussion as we go. I was just jumping over to make sure there was no new Q&A questions. I see. Nope. All right. And again, reminder, folks, you can unmute as we get into this, or you can drop questions in the chat. I'm trying to watch all the screens, keep an eye on everything. I know Lisa and Robin are also going to help me track anything that's maybe get missed, so we can just answer as we go. All right, so just jumping straight into it. Very first area, a category isn't quite the right word, right? But kind of focus area for an organization is, are tech responsible staff part of strategic decision making? All right, so there's a question. But for me, it's always important to quickly unpack assumptions and not just roll on assumed meanings, right? Because the connotation of some of these terms can mean different things at different organizations. And so in trying to help this content match with your reality, what I want to know is, right, prompt question, we've practiced, we've even stretched, people should be ready here. I want you to take a moment, and again, you've got some time to think, put it into the chat, and then we'll all post at the same time here. But either you as an individual or for you at your organization, how would you define tech responsible staff? So I'm going to be comfortable with a couple moments of Zoom silence and let people think and type. I need some Jeopardy music though. I will own that. There needs to be some sort of that goes while people are thinking. Folks getting there? All right. So Deborah, me. I'm not sure what that means, Deborah, but me too. I'm not sure. Lisa's in. All
I'm
right.
the person in charge of tech.
Oh, it's just me. Sweet.
As the co-president, we're very small. And so tech is me.
Perfect. And again, I love it. It's like, this is what we want. Like, we want to work in reality. We want to have conversations based in reality. So if that's how it gets defined, perfect. I'm not saying it's ideal, but it's the reality. And that's where we got to kind of function. So if you haven't yet, go ahead and you can post your comment in the chat so we can see where other folks are coming through. All right. So Ramona, tech ensures all tech is working properly and efficiently. All right. It's a pretty functionality based role. Perfect. Thanks, Ramona. Other folks still thinking or typing, it's totally fine. Even though we've hit the post thing, you can feel free to drop it in. So here's kind of a way I like to think about it. And again, this isn't to say like this is the only definition, but this is how we think about it as we try and work with organizations, do capacity building, right? It's those responsible for setting and implementing strategy and or making the decisions around technology. So that's go with this tool, not that tool. Yes, go ahead and purchase that thing. No, we don't have money to purchase. Go find a free alternative. One thing I really like about this definition is you'll notice it's got nothing to do with a title. It has nothing to do with an org chart structure, right? It's more based on functionality, not sort of formal hierarchy, which I think is helpful because organizations, you go through different sizes, different iterations, different kind of mission focus, right? They look very different ways. So this is a way that allows it to kind of fit no matter what your setup or structure is. So there's just a definition. kind of work and function with, and we do here at Intent, and not to say it's the only one. Again, Deborah, it's me. Well, if that's your reality, it's better to know and function within your reality than to sort of pretend like you're based off some Merriam-Webster definition that doesn't even fit anyways. So here's another question. And again, if there's anyone who wants to just sort of throw their voice into the room here, but what would you consider strategic decision-making? Again, it's kind of a loaded phrase, and it can look a lot of different ways. So you can either type this in the chat, or if anyone wants to volunteer to just kind of share out, you could just unmute yourself, video on or off. Either way, it's totally fine. Anyone? So we can do the volunteers, or I'm also happy to call folks into the space if that's how it goes. Good strategy requires a holistic view, right? Anyone else? Ramona, I'm looking at people that have engaged in the chat, so I know you're actually here, not multi-tabbing. Deborah?
Sorry, I did get distracted. Apologies.
That's all right. I've been on Zoom calls for a year straight as well. Anybody have something they want to share? All right. Well, in the interest of clipping along here, these are things that I think are helpful, and I kind of use as a way for me to just quickly decide, is this simply a decision? Is this simply a task? Is this just a thing we have to do? Or does this get at the level that it's sort of strategic and I need to kind of shift into a different gear, right? Quick questions, I just answer, and we move on. Strategic decisions, I think, I probably need to involve some people, some sort of process. I need to somehow be able to come back and anchor this decision to our strategy as an organization. So here's just, again, some simple ways I like to frame and think about it. You know, are there impacts beyond this discrete project? You know, if I make this decision, does it only matter for the next thing? Or is this something we all kind of have to live with now for the future? Does it impact budgeting? You know, as soon as it's a budgeting thing, there's at least 2 people from our organization that need to be involved across multiple teams. And one other thing that I think is really helpful to note is, does it create a noticeable shift in delivery of, you know, however your organization functions, services, programs, whatever it is you're doing to create change in your communities? Because a lot of times people be like, oh, we'll just grab that free tool. So it's not budgeting, and it feels like it's just about that program. But what you are doing is you're creating a shift in the experience the community has with your organization. And so it's like, that's another spot for me where it's like, maybe stop and check in and connect this to larger strategy and the work that we're doing. So I think those can be just some helpful prompts to think, is this strategic? Is this not? So a couple suggestions around this. One thing that groups have found to be helpful, we use these at times at N10 as well, but creating working groups. So this means rather than basing things just on org structure, hierarchy, traditional teams or departments, what are clusters of folks at your organization that do work together? And so that way bringing them together means that like decisions are already considering different perspectives. Oh, okay, fund development, communications, and program, we're all in the same room when the decision was made. The very nature of that approach will start to make you more strategic and make you more connected to the other moving pieces in the organization. And as I'm going along here, people can also drop any of their own suggestions right there in the chat, or unmute if you got something you want to share.
There is a good one in the chat from Deborah Fowler, basing decisions on being a good steward. Thought that was a good keyword.
Good steward, I like that phrasing. Another one that I've used is good human policy, right? So like from a standpoint of like trying to be a good human and assuming that others are trying to be good humans. Okay, let's inform how we can go. This one here, leverage project roles. So this is that, you know, a whole nother topic you can get into, but with formal project roles, a lot of times you identify someone who needs to be consulted. and they need to be brought in at different points to just say like, you're not technically on this project to work on it, but we need you to come and share some of your knowledge about the program or the fund development team so that it can inform the decisions that we're making. So again, I think it can be another easy way to systematize and just make sure these opportunities don't fall through the gaps. Formalize the process. So what this can look like is like a strategy screen is how I've heard a lot of organizations use it. And essentially, you collectively work to come up with like, if we're going to make a major decision, here's basically 5 questions we need to ask. It's just real quick to be like, is it moving us towards the mission? Is it, creating the experience we're working towards for our community? So it can just be a quick check to make sure it's like, I'm not chasing shiny tools. Every decision gets to run through what collectively as an organization we've already got buy-in and agreed is the important things we're going to use to make decisions. So I don't have to bring everyone from the team together because I'm using the tool that they already agreed on. So it allows people to make decisions, move quickly, but still stay connected and anchored in the mission and the theory of change and all that kind of stuff. All right, keeping us moving along here. Time check. So here's again, pretty straightforward. Do all staff have access to and use tech-related professional development? So again, quick question. Think about it in the chat. If typing in the chat is just cumbersome for any reason, I'm also happy to have you just jump in and unmute here. Again, typing in the chat assumes that, typing in this tool in English is a comfortable mode of communication. English could be a second, third language for you, whatever. So however you want to be able to contribute, go for it. So again, think about it for a second here. I'll give it that 60 seconds. Ready? Here we go. I like how Ramona turned her video back on since she felt like I called her out. Now she's like, I'm here, teacher. Don't mark me as absent.
I did not turn my video off, Ash.
I was just trying to, recognize you. I see you through Zoom. This is not a public shaming affair.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. So Robin here, a part of a national organization. Oh, I like that, Deborah. It's really nice when you can have that connection, the like national, local chapter, and those resources can really flow down. But in a lot of ways, I think that can be a massive win for smaller organizations. Not everyone has the same comfort level. Absolutely true, Robin. Yeah. So I think, this is a question to think about. Again, there's no one way to do it. There's no right. I'd say there is kind of a wrong way in the sense that like, if you don't, or it's discouraged, I would say that that's probably a wrong approach to using technology more efficient is to actively discourage your folks from getting trained on it.
We have a couple more comments in this chat, and they require online training, so their staff gets a lot. And then we actively look for opportunities to learn in conferences.
That's good. Conferences are good. You can pack a whole lot into a short window for people, which is great. Like time is our most limited resource on a good year. And this has not been a good year. And so even more so, people's capacity is limited. So it can be a nice, like, just do a focused sprint and people can get a ton of information. Online tools and stuff, I think that's really helpful as well. So here's this other question though. How do you know if it's being used, right? So when you hear these overarching statements, it's like, well, that makes sense. But it ultimately comes down to like, how do you know people are using the professional development they've engaged in? So someone went to a conference. Do you know what they learned and how it improved or impacted their work after? And I'll just acknowledge this one's trickier, right? This is definitely harder to get at. So here's some suggestions how I think we can address this. One is it's real if it's in the budget, right? So do you formally prioritize and recognize it in that way? Are there dedicated funds to making it happen? If there aren't funds, how do people know it's truly supported, right? I don't know about you. You could video on or off. You could just raise your hand. If you've ever worked somewhere where they told you, yeah, we support professional development, and yet they gave you absolutely no way to actually go and do it. And that you got the message of like, well, we're not going to pay for anything. Like you can't even sign up for that $50 course, but we support professional development, right? I've definitely worked at some places like that. So this is something, again, it doesn't have to be a massive line item. Even recognizing that like each staff person gets allotted $200 a year. It just legitimizes that one, it's supported, but two, it's important. We've said it's something to dedicate funds to, so it reinforces the message to staff that it's something we actually want you to go and do. Another one, assign professional development support as a formal role. So again, not that this is a whole brand new job. I didn't say position. I just said role, sort of responsibility. So just having someone on the team who, even if it's just every 6 months, even once a year, if you've got super limited capacity, but just roughly checks in on other folks and says, what are you interested in? Are you finding resources? If you found something awesome, you want to share it with other people. Again, just knowing that as things pop up in the conversation, they start to feel normal and they start to feel part of the organizational culture, as opposed to here's this thing, this is walking the talk. Like we actually talked about this. And third tip here, socialize the learning. So what I think is really helpful, a lot of organizations do is like lunch and learns, internal capacity building things, right? So when you send that staff to that conference, do they just do a quick 30-minute share out when they get back to the rest of the team to be like, here were a couple sessions that were super helpful and here's a couple things I learned? Again, maybe it's a lunch and learn, a real-time gathering. Maybe they just share some quick updates in an internal whatever, but just finding a way to have people get it back out is effectively helping them put it to use, helping extend the impact from that. So again, these are all ways that low lift, not super tricky, but to be honest, if you aren't being strategic and intentional, it's really easy for it to just slip through and not happen at all. All right, I'm gonna keep this clip. Another stretch break. We'll keep this going fast. I realize we're crunched for time. So pick one. Ooh, I know what I'm feeling today. I'm definitely going for number 4. Again, these are options, should work for sitting, standing, wherever you're at. All right, so I'm gonna put my pick in the chat. And then we'll jump into Melissa's question right after this. But all right, remember, you can break eye contact. In fact, I encourage it for a moment. All right, here we go. Off and running. So close. All right. Good job. Let's see, we got a few more folks getting into it.
If I could
Excellent.
make a very quick comment, my background is in dance and physical movement, and I'm glad to see everybody taking their hands behind their ears because that opens up the diaphragm and the breathing. But here's the key. Please don't move your head forward.
Oh,
Make sure you keep your head straight and then take it back, because when you do this, what you're doing is you're stressing your upper vertebrae. So just a heads up, keep your head straight and keep those arms back. It's marvelous. Thank you.
That's perfect tip. You just saved me from myself because I'm sure I was doing that. And clearly in the instructions, it doesn't say bend your head forward. So thank you for that. All right, moving on here. So this the next kind of area of focus here is a tech responsible staff person, part of the leadership team. So again, we've already unpacked that question, like how would you define a tech responsible person? So that's one of the ones in here where again, I'm like, how would you define that? So now this idea of how do you define a leadership team? So again, you can put it in the chat here. You can just open up and just, this happens lots of different ways at different organizations. And it's really important to understand this, to understand what it means to involve a tech responsible person. So I'll give this just a moment and just acknowledge. All right, go ahead, post. Leaders are decision makers. Yes, thanks. All right, leaders are decision makers. So someone who's sort of officially recognized as you make a decision around here. So that makes you part of a leadership group, formal team. Anybody have like real rigid definition of what leadership team means? Does it mean department directors? Does it mean just C-level staff? Does it mean anyone who wants to come together around a particular topic and it's more kind of free form? Robin, perfect. Yep. And that may be by the, that may be good or bad, that it's basically everyone with a higher salary than you. Some people like to just bump up against and not have to step into. Board of directors with committees. All right. So for you, leadership team falls largely to the board. I think a lot of organizations do that, Melissa.
Over on the other chat, we've got everybody is part of the leadership at some level because we have a staff of 3. That's from Kim Jones.
Perfect. And thanks for catching that Zoom chat. I've got so many windows. I didn't have that one open.
Well, some are, some have different technologies and they don't all be able to.
I'm just happy we're catching them wherever they're at and it's not just falling through. We're doing what we can on the fly here for sure. All right. So the next thing, right, is like, are there different ways being involved can look? So again, think about if people want to unmute, they can jump in and share. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to jump into the suggestions here. So some ways we've seen organizations be successful, and we've tested some ourselves, right, is formalize that tech responsible, being a tech responsible staff is a required role within the leadership team. So sometimes that can mean, like officially recognizing someone from the IT department must be represented on this team. That works in some sense. A lot of organizations are like, that'd be awesome if we had an IT department and enough people in it to say someone's the head of it. So again, a role, not a job, not a title. So if you've got a rigid set of who's on your leadership team, at least recognizing one of the people then who land on that needs to fill that role of being responsible for tech. So there's one way to kind of make an adjustment within an existing system. I'm actually a big fan of this one, right? Frame leadership as a function, not based on titles, right? So when you say leadership team, it's again, not just pulling off a hierarchy from an org chart. It's more based on function, what you're trying to accomplish. Leaders can come from all kinds of levels within an organization. Sometimes leadership teams just involve some of your volunteers, but it's your long-term volunteer and they know your program and your experience really well. So you can get them involved. Last one is take the special guest approach. So this is, if it can't formally fit within it, at least a nice alternative is to say that like, okay, but when decisions are coming up for that team, make sure you bring in that tech responsible staff, even if they're not formally on the team. Again, trying to recognize the scale, range of options and ways to approach this. I think that can be another way. Again, just in some way being intentional that it's represented, because if it's not, it will be forgotten and it will slip through the cracks. And it will basically, it will hinder you from being more effective with your technology and more, equitable in how you're applying it. I appreciate you riding along on this fast pace as we clip through, making up some time. So I like this one. Is tech budgeted for intentionally? So like, i.e. it's not in the same category as like, we have some office and the coffee and some snacks, and tech is just in this sort of general funds, random bucket sort of thing. So again, I told you I would be working hard to try and get you pulled in here. And now I have both chats. So honestly, whichever chat you can post into, post away. But think about this. So at your organization, how do you budget for technology? And I think what's also helpful to note here is an appropriate answer could be, I don't know, Ash, right? Those are just as important because they help identify gaps and things to maybe look into after the event here. All right, go ahead. Ready? So I see Ramona, right? As needed, real reactionary, which again is a reality, I think, for a lot of organizations. And if you dig into the report data, you'll actually see, yes, there's actually a number of organizations. It's very much in that. It's like, when do I get a new computer? Well, when the one you're using catches on fire. Yeah. As opposed to, lots of other ways you could approach it.
On this side,
right.
there's, we do budget for tech, but it's never enough. Someone else says, as it comes up, which is the similar to,
Let's
and
see.
we budget for outsource IT help
Yep.
internally as needed.
Yeah, it's just an external service, and that you can kind of count on it. And as you know, maintenance contracts, support contracts, all that kind of stuff. So the main thing to point out there, right? Like there's a number of ways that you can do it. And again, I think the way that works for your organization is the way that will be used. So I am far more a fan of saying, like, understand your organizational culture, how decisions get made, what the power dynamics are and all that. And finding solutions within that is usually what will move you forward faster, as opposed to saying, well, I got told by an external expert, it has to be done this way. And now I'm going to try and force it into our organizational culture. We want things that get used and create impact, not necessarily just sort of sit on the shelf kind of ideas. All right, we'll see. Joey, I'll get to that in just a second. So, what are the different ways this can be done? We already had some great suggestions. I'm just going to pull these up here. Formal category in the budget, right? So this is just like technology, IT, and it sits as its kind of own bucket amongst everything else. And if that can happen, that can be great. Again, what's in the budget also implies what are your priorities? What do you focus on as an organization? When you're submitting to funders, you're trying to get support from partners, things like that. It's a way to demonstrate, yes, this is just as important to us as, having program staff, having buildings to work in, or just having equipment to work from home, because most of us don't need that work office anymore, right? So another one is subcategories across various teams. So this is so within program, there's also sort of a sub technology budget. Fund development has another. So again, can't work for everybody, but one of the things I do like about this is that it can really help set things up in terms of budgeting internally, but I think when you're going after support from funders, because it's nice to say well, we need that technology in order to run the program, because funders will say, well, we're super happy to support your program, but we don't support general operating costs like technology. And so just making it super clear that there is no separation. We cannot deliver this program without the appropriate technology to do it right. And so it allows you to kind of bundle those things in a way that you're selling that message to the funders, but also a way where, you can convince them that, yeah, the funding will go towards a platform or a tool, but that's because it's part of the program. It's, again, not us just trying to buy tech because we need tech. And then another one is having a formal IT technology plan, right? Do you say, we will plan to rotate out laptops? They say 3 to 5 years is the lifespan for a laptop. So if I already know that, it makes it easier to budget and be like, all right, we have 10 staff. Every year, we're going to be rotating out 3 machines. So we know every single year kind of roughly how much we can count on. The reactive approach can be tough. If you have 5 machines go out in the same year and you weren't expecting it, that can be a lot of money. And that can be a real strain on a budget, because budgets were set before you arrived there. So that can be a tip. I'm just trying to look real close here. There's a message through Zoom. How about showing your bullets and moments and then asking for input rather than waiting for input? All right. Excellent tip. All right. So in this last one here, we have 10 minutes. So we're going to try and get through this here. Is ROI evaluated for various tech systems? So here's a little bit of that jargon bingo for those of you playing at home, right? ROI, what does that mean? So here's the definition. I'm not going to read it. I'll let you read it off the screen. Here's a pretty standard one that's out there, right? I understand all the words in it. I even understand how a bunch of those words kind of fit together, but it still feels pretty clunky in terms of a thing that you would actually say and throw out there, right? So jumping to that next, what does it mean when you try and calculate ROI? So here's a pretty standard definition of how you calculate it. Here's a very common sort of formula. And I read that and I'm just like, what? Nope, not gonna, I'm done, right? And so I think a lot of us approach this where it's like, yes, we should calculate ROI. And we kind of head down the path. And then we run into some of these kind of approaches, and pretty quickly you're like, I'm going to do something else that I feel like makes more sense and I can kind of get done, a little quicker. So there are some spots where this kind of ROI approach does fit pretty easily, right? We spend $500 on digital advertising on Facebook and LinkedIn or whatever. We can track that from that. We were able to get 20 new email signups. Okay, so for digital advertising on those platforms, it essentially costs us $25 per sign up. So obviously this is a very stripped down, simplified version of how you get at it. But just to kind of illustrate the point, right? When you're talking about things that you very clearly can kind of one-to-one relationships. I put money into this. There's a single output on the other side that we can attribute a dollar value to. Great. Now I can do my ROI sort of calculation. Where it gets tricky are all the other situations that come up, right? How do you calculate the cost of a person using a tool? This comes up all the time with the database or a CRM, right? Like, well, what's the ROI of our new database? And you're like, well, that is absolutely not a one-to-one, right? Like different people use it in different ways to do different tasks, to allow things to happen. What's the value of a better user experience, right? Can you put a dollar amount on, I didn't really use the old database because I hated it. And so I just avoided it. And now we're in a new one and I understand it and I feel like I can use it better. So I actually use it. It's like, all right, well, that's, I don't even know. And then, what's the value of a new tool? Just playing well with all your other tools, playing better than the last one did, right? So these are questions we run up against, but they're really challenging to fit in that sort of classic standard sort of look. So we have a prompt question here. I'm just gonna let it fly again because we've only got 6 minutes till we hit the end of our time here. So again, think about how do you define ROI at your organization? And then the big question, right? How would you actually measure that? And so what I'll do here, and I see your point, Joey, about, if we had more time, allowing more space to kind of think and process and let us work. And that was the hope and goal. So unfortunately, don't have quite as much time here. If we got a little space at the end, maybe allow some of that. So one thing to think about when you're trying to do this ROI is a lot of times people will look at a static thing, right? Like we spent this money, this was the result, what does that mean? And I actually think it's far more important to look at sort of a comparison of things, right? So when I'm looking at a tool, I'm going to calculate the ROI for our bulk email platform. A lot of times people go like, all right, well, we pay this much a year and we can have up to 10,000 people on the list. And at a gut check, you go, okay, I guess that works for us. As opposed to the difference of like, okay, but if I were looking at a couple different tools, there's $500 per year for this many contacts, 1,000, 2,500. Oh, okay. So now you're comparing options. And so what you're really deciding is the return of picking this option over these other options, what's better for us? And I think that can be, just a helpful reminder to watch the whole movie, get the whole story in comparison, rather than just looking at the postcard snapshot, static moment in time. Some suggestions. I'll just roll all these out again, trying to be mindful of time here. So really important stuff. Doing ROI is an ongoing thing, right? So depending on the system, how frequently you do it, but just in general, say if you were doing it on a yearly basis, stopping for a moment and asking the question, has the context for our decisions changed, right? So we made certain decisions 2 years ago based on our reality at that time. And it's pretty easy to see right now into COVID, right? Like, has the world or the context and things that we would base those decisions on, has it significantly changed since we made those decisions in the past? Has technology or your options evolved? What was even an option 2 years ago might be completely different now. Oh, there's now an option that directly integrates with our database. And that wasn't even a thing 2 years ago. And then what's the user narrative? right? So people on your team, people you're serving in your community, are they just saying it's a better experience? They're having fewer pain points. There's some wins. Like, I can actually run reports now and I couldn't before. Like, that's a valuable way to measure both the qualitative and quantitative aspect of the tools that you're using. I like to think of this as, you know, on an annual basis, I'll do just another quick round of product selection. And essentially, it's just got these steps to it, right? Just refresh what are our needs and our requirements, do some research on what the various options are that can meet it, and then what's the best fit now as well as in our near future. Again, doing this annually, great. Sometimes the reality is, and if it's a bigger system for you, you might actually just do this every 3 years. You know, you're not going to be switching your database every year. That's just going to be painful. But every 3 to 5 years, you should probably be stopping and double checking what's happening. And again, if you've built a real systematized way to do this, what are our needs? What are the options? What's the best fit? It can actually make it feel pretty easy to roll this out, you know, every couple of years, as opposed to feeling like you're reinventing the wheel every time. Stretch break. Oh, it's gonna run. Sorry, it's got to run through that 15 seconds. Done, done. Final stretch, final slides here. There. Oh, I'm just doing one of them. All right, some final wrap up slides here in the last 120 seconds. There was an activity. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to open it up. And if you want to follow the Miro link, which I'll share in the chat again here real quick, there are 2 activities that, if you so desire, you can go at your leisure and try them out and see if they're helpful. Oops, I gotta make sure this goes to everyone in Zoom. I'm trying to chat it in all the places. All right. Prompt question. We will jump beyond this as well. Again, I am gonna say, please think about TechAccelerate. I think it's an amazing tool. I knew it. Yes, I looped back around to recommend it again, just as a resource. Encourage you to check it out or let me know if you have questions. Making it stick, right, beyond this particular session. I don't know if folks are familiar with the forgetting curve, right? You will forget at least 75% of this information within 24 hours. So simple little tricks, even spending as little as 3 to 6 seconds thinking about any of the content in this actually causes your brain to try and bring the other pieces that that's connected to back. And eventually you can move more and more of it from short term before it gets dumped in the garbage and move it over to long term where it actually becomes skills and capacity. Last one's here. Just don't overcomplicate, right? There's a lot of stuff here. Pick 1 or 2 things that you think are going to be helpful and just start there. You can always come back to this content, pick up other tips and things later. Feedback surveys. Do it for the session. Do it for the overall conference. Thank you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you riding along for the rodeo as we just tried to get this rolled out and happening on time while Zoom licenses were fighting in the background.
Well, and thank you.
I'm going to turn it over. We just hit 16 after.
Yep. Thank you for rescuing this whole breakout session. It was excellent. I know everybody agrees. What we've done, because we are having these technical difficulties, if you cannot access your next session, an email has been sent to you via the email you used to register for this conference with a link to the other sessions. So there's 2 ways to get in, and hopefully we won't have as many difficulties in the next breakout. So remember that we'd like you to get to evaluate this session under surveys. You can go ahead and fill that out, and otherwise enjoy the rest of your day. Ash, thank you so much, and thanks to Lisa for helping out so gallantly here.